How can a Linux OS be based on another Linux OS? I've been looking through quite a number of Linux distros recently to get an idea of what's around, and one phrase that keeps coming up is that this OS is based on another OS. For example, Fedora is based on Red Hat. Ubuntu is based on Debian. Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu. For someone coming from a Mac environment, I understand how OS X is based on Darwin. However, when I look at Linux distros, I find myself asking, aren't they all based on Linux? In this context, what exactly does it mean for one Linux OS to be based on another Linux OS?
Linux is a kernel, Debian is a distribution of that kernel and a bunch of software to actually interact with the system. I can now take Debian and change the logo on the boot screen to my own logo, and then my distribution is based on Debian, in a very primitive way. Usually, the adjustments that are made in a derived distribution are more substantial. The point is, if you would want to change something about a distribution, then you can just take that one, modify it to your liking, and then publish your own distribution, based on the existing one, as long as all licenses are respected.
Linux is a kernel, a complex piece of software which works with the hardware and exports a certain application programming interface, API, and binary conventions on how to precisely use it. Application Binary Interface, ABI, available to the user space applications. Debian, Red Hat and others are operating systems, complete software environments which consist of the kernel and a set of user space programs which make the computer useful as they perform sensible tasks, sending/receiving mail, allowing you to browse the internet, driving a robot, etc. Now each such OS, while providing mostly the same software, there are not so many free mail server programs or internet browsers or desktop environments, for example, differ in approaches to do this and also in their stated goals and release cycles. Quite typically these OSs are called distributions. This is, EMO, a somewhat wrong term stemming from the fact you're technically able to build all the required software by hand and install it on a target machine. So these OSs distribute the packaged software, so you either don't need to build it, Debian, Red Hat, or they facilitate such building, Gentoo. They also usually provide an installer which helps to install the OS onto a target machine. Making and supporting an OS is a very complicated task requiring a complex and intricate infrastructure, upload queues, build servers, a bug tracker, and archive servers, mailing list software, etc., 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 and staff. This obviously raises a high barrier for creating a new, from scratch OS. For instance, Debian provides ca. 37K packages for some 5 hardware architectures. Go figure how much work is put into supporting this stuff. Still, if someone thinks they need to create a new OS for whatever reason, it may be a good idea to use an existing foundation to build on. And this is exactly where OSs based on other OSs come into existence. For instance, Ubuntu builds upon Debian by just importing most packages from it and repackaging only a small subset of them, plus packaging their own, providing their own artwork, default settings, documentation, etc. Note that there are variations to this based on thing. For instance, Debian fosters the creation of pure blends of itself, distributions which use Debian rather directly, and just add a bunch of packages and other stuff only useful for rather small groups of users such as those working in education or medicine or music industry, etc. Another twist is that not all these OSs are based on Linux. For instance, Debian also provide FreeBSD and herd kernels. They have quite tiny user groups, but anyway.
Red Hat, Debian, etc. are all distributions, distros, of Linux. Keep in mind that Linux is technically only the kernel, which is a single part of a working and useful system. You'll need basic utilities, decisions regarding where things live in the system, a mechanism for installing and updating software, and conventions/standards, such as the directory where programs go, to tie this together. Most of the new versions of classic utilities are often considered basic by many distros, and thus is why Debian, for example, calls it new/Linux. With just about everything else though, there are a lot of choices. And since Linux, the new utilities, and many things that run under Linux are free software, anyone can create a new distribution anytime they want, including derived from an existing distro if that distro has not included anything copyrighted or proprietary. Images and logos are frequently something that is trademarked/copyrighted and usually cannot be directly used in a derivative distro unless you obey terms and conditions of whoever owns that. The same software usually can be if it's GPL or GPL-like license. One major thing that is usually distro-specific is the package manager or method which software is maintained, tested, and distributed. Derived distributions usually are compatible with their upstream package managers. Nothing is stopping you from manual program installation on any Linux distro, though. Typically this means that you'll install software the same way using the same package manager, and the locations of executables and configuration files will be in the same place.
With Linux there are distributions or distros. Literally hundreds of them. Linux is open source, so anyone, or any group or company, can modify any part of the OS that they wish. This is why some versions have different installers, .deb versus RPM or just tar, and different commands, apt-get versus yum. Most distros choose a target use or specific uses and sort of evolve around that. For example, Red Hat and its relatives are server-oriented. Most of the OS is designed around being stable or fast. Debian is meant to be easier to use, so it supports .deb files which are easy installer packages. Ubuntu took the Debian base and added code and packages to make it a good first Linux distro. Mint then went and stripped some of the Ubuntu code to make a faster OS that is similar to Ubuntu but also more of a traditional desktop when Ubuntu changed the desktop manager to Unity. Here is a detailed new/Linux family tree. This URL.
If you want to support